everyone, this is Tori Bowler, and today I will be presenting on the parental expectation that's featured in Dare to Disappoint Growing Up in Turkey by Ozge Samanci. My main point of focus in this graphic novel was the fact that it is an autobiographical comic. Because it's written by Ozge Samanci about her life going from a child all the way up to her senior year of college and a little bit beyond that. So I looked into the paper written by Elizabeth L. Rothray, which was Visual Modality versus Authenticity, the example of autobiographical comics. So to quote Elizabeth, its autobiographical comics never claim to offer a direct, mimetic representation of the world, but rather an interpretation of events as they are experienced by the artist. I chose this portion because it really gives you an idea of what it might be like to create an autobiographical comic, because, you know, it's not just like a chapter book where you're just getting words, you know, writing down somebody's experience. It's words, obviously, but there are also a lot of pictures and different mediums that are used in order to further portray the story that needs to be told. So like she's saying, they don't claim to be an exact representation of the world. It's really up to the author and the artist to decide what they, you know, put into an autobiographical comic and what they omit from it. And obviously not everything is going to be exactly as it happened in real life, but, you know, what the artist thought about that event and how they experienced it. So if you look, I added this page from the novel where we have Ozge talking to Jacques Cousteau, the explorer, but it's just a poster of him that she has in her room. And though he's someone that she really looked up to, he wasn't a physical person that she had ever actually encountered in her life, and she never had had an actual conversation with him, as far as we saw in the novel. But, you know, we see her here talking to him, and they're having a full-on conversation about, you know, her father and how the choices she made were to please her father, and that he's not happy regardless of what she chooses with him in mind. So what I believe is that for this page specifically, it's a representation of Ozge Samanci's experience of her own thoughts, and that Jacques is just a physical representation of her conscience and her dealing with this and trying to figure it out on her own. But instead of her just sitting there and have all these thought bubbles around her, we see, you know, her talking with Jacques, and it's a much more fluent, you know, event that happens in the story. So the next portion that I focused on was by Charles Hatfield. He wrote Comic Art, Children's Literature, and the New Comic Studies. So in his paper, he writes, out of this traffic, where he's talking about Peanuts by Charles Schulz, has come since the 1970s a strand of autobiographical comics that plays out the confusions of childhood in provocative, unsentimental ways. You know, so I chose this portion because obviously Dare to Disappoint Growing Up in Turkey does focus on Ozge's childhood into adulthood and her coming of age. And starting in the 1970s, there have been a lot of autobiographical comics, but to say that that there are a lot of them that play out the confusions of childhood in provocative, unsentimental ways is really interesting to me, because it's something that you can see in Dare to Disappoint, where it's not exactly a fantastical childhood that's shown in the novel. It's all the serious aspects of her life and the reality of her childhood. And I think it's interesting because, you know, you can pick up this book and not even be from Turkey, but you can see how she experienced things and learn how it was like to live in Turkey when she was growing up. And you're still, at least for me, I was able to, kind of resonate with her in a way, because she is a child, and obviously I've been a child, uh, but there are just so many things that happened in her life that I've never experienced, but I was able to look at them and connect with her in a way. So, moving on to my research question. My question was, how does the projection of her father's expectations and disappointments affect Ozge and Dare to Disappoint growing up in Turkey? So for this, I explore the ways in which an autobiographical comic reflects Ozge's struggle with her father. I was able to utilize Elizabeth L. Rafael's visual modality versus authenticity, the example of autobiographical comics, to communicate the depth of Samanci's art. Ozge Samanci's Dare to Disappoint growing up in Turkey delves into the origins of her desires to please her father, and the growth towards acknowledging this is reflected via her transition from childhood to adulthood. So, real quick, before I get to the conclusion, I just wanted to draw your attention to this page. This is the point in which Ozge is with her two friends, and they are looking at all of her old math notes, and they all realize that there are a lot of doodles and art drawings on them. And her friends tell her that she can be an artist. And she's like, me? And she says, well, let's face it, I studied math, and there are a zillion talented art school graduates out there. Why would anyone look at my stupid drawings? So her friend lets her know that this pessimistic voice in her is not her Ozge's genuine thoughts. It's something that has been planted in her mind by her father, where she's asking, can you dare to disappoint his voice in you? So even though her father's not physically there with her, his pessimism has been implemented into her life for so long that she is worried about what he thinks at any point in time when she's making big decisions in her life. And so her friend is trying to show her, you're allowed to do what you want and not worry about what your father wants. And, she's asking, can you dare to disappoint him? Because Ozge would have to decide on her own if she would rather listen to her father or, follow her own thoughts and dreams. So in conclusion, Ozge Samanci's Dare to Disappoint growing up in Turkey explores the depth of Ozge's desire to please her father. The graphic novel medium allows for an in-depth analysis of the inner thoughts of the artist and writer.